Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled, Jim, if you're going to be a crusty new captain, at least have a sense of humor. This little video has to do with a couple of captains we had on the 737. Now, how can you be a crusty old captain on our beginning aircraft, 737? We called that the Guppy. Well, they were. They had a dad who I understand was really a piece of work, who had been a previous United captain, and I guess he taught him well, because Jim Leroy, that's not his real last name, but he was an interesting captain to fly with. I flew with him as a co-pilot on the 737, then again the 727. Well, here's the story. We were going to an ALPA meeting. No, not the big fancy one down in Washington, D.C. This was a small group, just Jim and I, and a couple of United training people from the training center who were going to be involved in bringing the 737-300 to United Airlines. And this is what the 737-300s look like. We were flying the old 200s at the time, and that's what I was qualified on. And I was a very junior co-pilot on this aircraft and very new to the company, but they wanted me involved because of my flight test background. So I said, well, okay. So I did. So we're up at the meeting, and we actually, United actually made some significant changes to the basic 737-300. A lot of people probably wouldn't even recognize the original design. I'm going to cover that in a later presentation because it's kind of interesting what we accomplished and how we made this a much better aircraft than it would have been. But we had a very good and productive meeting with Boeing, one of several. And after this meeting, Jim and I went out and we had dinner. Okay, now we went to a real fancy restaurant in Seattle, and yeah, we were having pizza. And Jim and I are sitting there and we're talking, and we had both at this time consumed a pitcher of beer each. Okay, I get a little relaxed, let's put it that way, after one or two beers, but we'd each down a pitcher. And Jim says to me, he said, you know what my limiting factor is? And I go, no, Jim, what's your limiting factor? And he says, well, as a captain, my limiting factor is co-pilots. I am always waiting for the co-pilot to do their job. And I go, well, Jim, the co-pilot's got about 10 times the amount of work you do. You can do your setup in the time he's out there just doing the walk around, and then he's got to come back in. He's got to do his setup. He's got to set up all the performance data, and it wasn't in the ACAR system like now where you just punch it in there and it's spits it out. He had to actually go in the books and do it. So I said, he's got a lot to do. And he goes, well, those are the duties he was assigned, and he should be able to do them in the same amount of time I do mine. And I go, well, Jim, I think that's a little unfair, but I'll tell you what, you wouldn't be waiting for me. Okay, fine. Meeting's over. We go back to Chicago. We're both based at Chicago on the 737-200. He's a captain. I'm a co-pilot. So I'm on reserve. I get a call from the crew desk that I've got this trip I'm going on. I go, okay, fine. Who's the captain? They go, it's Jim Leroy. And I go, oh my gosh, he set this up. I'm being called. You know, we had just gotten back from the meeting. He's gonna call my bluff here. And I go, gosh, I'm in big trouble. So man, I get out to the airport early. In fact, I am actually in the parking lot when my wife calls me on 2 meters ham radio that we had between the house and the car and says, Jim Leroy wants to talk to you. And I said, about what? And he says, well, some of the things on the 737. I said, well, heck, we can talk, on a flight. We're scheduled to fly together. And he actually didn't even know that I was the co-pilot scheduled to fly with him because I guess the original co-pilot had bailed, which seemed to happen with Jim a lot. But the original co-pilot had bailed, and being on reserve, I was assigned. So he says, oh, okay, I didn't know that. Well, I'll meet you out there. Okay. So we get out into operations, and we're going through the paperwork and everything, and you're supposed to be at the airplane 45 minutes early. And, okay, I am definitely going to be. I was there even earlier than 45 minutes. The airplane was there. It was ready to go. So I get out there. I do my walk around. I get my cockpit setup all done. I mean, I am ready to go. Like 15 minutes early, I've got everything done. But of course, one of the things you got to do is you got to get the clearance, and that has to be heard by both pilots. Well, Jim gets talking to somebody in operations, and he's late, and he actually comes 10 minutes before departure, and he's bringing his flight bag, and he's setting it down, and we happen to have a jump seater on the flight there. A guy who wants to, get a ride to wherever we were going that day. And, it's 10 minutes before. It's time to get the clearance. I figured Jim could at least listen up on the radio while he's getting situated. And so I said to Jim, I go, Captain, are you ready for the clearance? He kind of looks at me and goes, hey, I just got here. Give me a minute. And without skipping a beat, I turned to the jump seater and said, you know what my limiting factor is? And he kind of looks at me and goes, what? I said, my limiting factors are captains. I'm always waiting for the captain. That's when I found out, to my chagrin, that Captain Jim Leroy did not have a sense of humor. Anyway, that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it, found it interesting, amusing, informative, or at least non-fattening. Anyway, thanks for watching.